The first light of a Colorado dawn was just beginning to bleed over the jagged peaks of the Rockies, painting the sky in weak shades of gray and pink when I walked out my front door and saw the wreckage. For a long, frozen moment, my brain refused to process the image. My Ford F-350, the heart of my snow removal business, wasn't just vandalized. It was a twisted, brutalized sculpture of ruined metal. The custom 8-foot plow blade was bent backward at a grotesque 90-degree angle. All four tires were slashed, sitting flat on their rims. The windshield and every window were a spiderweb of fractures, and deep, savage gouges from a crowbar ran along the doors. Beneath the chassis, a dark, iridescent pool of hydraulic fluid and motor oil spread across the clean concrete of my driveway, the scent sharp and acrid in the cold morning air. This wasn't petty mischief. This was a message delivered with sledgehammers and pure, concentrated spite. My name is Marcus Lawson. For 8 years, I'd lived on this isolated parcel at the literal crossroads of Pinewood Ridge, an upscale mountain community outside of Vail. My property was unique. It sat right where the county-maintained highway met the single paved access road that serviced the 45 homes of the HOA. I bought it for the privacy and the strategic location, perfect for my side business. More importantly, the deed came with an easement recorded 2 decades before the first HOA covenant was ever written, explicitly granting me the right to park commercial vehicles on my land. I'd paid 3 different lawyers to confirm it was ironclad before I signed the papers. For years, it had been a non-issue, until Brenda Whitmore became HOA president. I pulled out my phone, my hand steady despite the cold fury tightening my chest. I called the Summit County Sheriff's Department, reported a felony property destruction, and then began meticulously documenting the scene. The November air was biting, my breath pluming as I circled the truck, capturing every angle: the shattered glass, the mangled blade, the artistic cruelty of the damage. The early sun cast long, dramatic shadows, highlighting the violence done to the machine that was my livelihood. The weather forecast, which I checked last night, echoed in my mind: another major storm system due in 48 hours. This was calculated timing. Deputy Chun arrived half an hour later, his cruiser crunching up my long gravel drive. He was a solid, practical man I knew from occasional encounters at the local diner. His normally calm eyes widened as he took in the scene. "Hell, Marcus," he said, stepping out and pulling his coat tighter. "Talk to me." "Went to bed at 11. Truck was fine." I said, my voice flat. "Woke up at 6 to this. I've got a pretty good idea who's behind it, but I want it all on the official record. I needed the foundation laid, brick by bureaucratic brick." He nodded, pulling out his notebook and a small camera. As he worked, he whistled low. "We're looking at tens of thousands here. This crosses well into felony territory. You mentioned you suspect someone. The HOA. Specifically, Brenda Whitmore. They've been sending me violation notices for 3 months about parking a commercial eyesore on my property. I've sent them copies of the easement, spoke to their lawyer. Last week, at the community meeting, Brenda said, and I quote, "One way or another, that eyesore we dealt with." I have it on recording. Their bylaws require meetings to be recorded. Deputy Chin's pen paused. She specifically threatened destruction. It was a threat, clear as day. The recordings on this drive. I handed him a USB stick I'd prepared after that meeting, a cold intuition telling me I'd need it. He took it, his expression grim. "Security cameras? Never needed them up here. My nearest neighbor is the Hendersons, half a mile down. They're in their 70s. I doubt they heard a thing." After he finished his report and promised to follow up with the HOA board, I was left alone with the silent, expensive corpse of my truck. The irony of the situation was almost beautiful in its bitterness. Pinewood Ridge occupied a geographic quirk. The county plowed the highway, but every inch of road beyond my property line, the winding lanes that connected all those luxury homes, was privately owned and maintained by the HOA. And for the past 6 winters, they'd hired me to plow those very roads. My destroyed truck was the same one that kept their world accessible from November to April. I didn't wait for Brenda to hear it from the sheriff. I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice layered with a saccharine, false warmth. Marcus, what surprise. What can I do for you this morning? I cut straight to it. Someone destroyed my snowplow truck last night. The sheriff is investigating it as a felony. I'm calling to inform you I cannot fulfill my snow removal contract until I secure a replacement, which could take weeks. The pause on the line was long and heavy. Are you suggesting the HOA had something to do with this? I'm stating facts, Brenda. My truck is destroyed. I cannot plow. There's a major storm coming in 2 days. You should start lining up alternative services. Her tone shifted, the sweetness evaporating. Now, Marcus, let's not be hasty. This is an unfortunate coincidence. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement about your parking situation, and you can rent equipment to fulfill your obligations. My parking situation is legal, I said, each word measured. Rental rates during a storm are triple my operating cost. Unless the HOA is covering the difference, I can't help you. Her voice turned to ice. You are contractually obligated through March 31st. Breach that, and we will sue. A grim smile touched my lips. Check Section 12, subsection C, Brenda. The force majeure clause for equipment failure. Criminal destruction qualifies. I've documented everything. Sue me. I'll see you in court. In the meantime, you better start making calls. I ended the call, the image of my ruined truck blazing in my mind. The trap, I realized, wasn't just theirs. The coming snow would see to that. The snow began just as predicted, in the deep, quiet hours of November 17th. I stood at my living room window, watching the world transform. Fat, heavy flakes fell straight down in a windless silence, a relentless curtain of white that muffled all sound. By sunrise, Pinewood Ridge was buried under a foot of fresh powder, and it showed no sign of stopping. The forecast had escalated, 18 to 24 inches, with winds set to rise and create nightmare drifts. My phone, silent and dark on the kitchen counter, erupted to life at 7 a.m. The first call was from a number I recognized as the Reynolds family, 3 houses up the ridge. I let it ring out, then another and another. By 9 o'clock, the device was a constant, buzzing artifact of panic. 14 missed calls, 23 texts, their tone shifting from confused inquiry to desperate pleading. The common thread was undeniable. No one could get out. The county had done its job. The highway was clear, but the HOA's private roads and the critical access road through my property were impassable trenches of snow. I moved through my morning with a deliberate, almost ritualistic slowness. I made a full breakfast, eggs, thick-cut bacon, toast, and ate it while looking out at the swirling white. My own driveway remained a stark, dark ribbon of dry asphalt. Years ago, I'd installed a radiant heating system underneath it, a luxury that now felt like the ultimate strategic advantage. The house was stocked, the generator fueled, the well deep. I was a fortress, and the siege had begun in earnest. The pounding on my door at 10:30 was violent, insistent. Through the window, I saw Brenda Whitmore standing on my porch, her expensive, puffy coat dusted with snow, her face a mottled red canvas of cold and fury. I opened the door, but left the chain engaged, blocking the entrance with my body. The wind whipped a flurry of snow into the entryway. "We need to talk," she spat, her breath clouding between us. "So talk." I kept my voice level. "You need to plow the roads. People can't get to work. There are medical concerns. The Johnson's daughter has a flight today for her wedding." Her words tumbled out. A list of grievances she seemed to believe were my responsibility. "That sounds like a significant problem," I replied. "Have you secured an alternative snow removal service?" "Everyone is booked. We've called 8 companies. No one can get here until tomorrow at the earliest. And they're charging," she hesitated, as if saying the number made it more real, "emergency rates." "How much?" $5,000, she forced out. "For a single pass, and another 3 to stay on call for the day." I let out a low, slow whistle. "That is steep. Our contract was for $1,200 per storm cycle, which is precisely why you need me to honor it." "I can't," I said, the simplicity of a statement hanging in the frozen air. "No truck. We discussed this." Her composure shattered. You did this on purpose, she hissed, her eyes blazing. You sabotaged your own truck to extort us. I leaned against the doorframe, letting the accusation settle. That is a serious allegation, Brenda. Do you have any evidence? Because the sheriff's department is investigating the destruction of my property as felony criminal mischief. If you're accusing me of insurance fraud and filing a false police report, you'd better be prepared to back that up. She sputtered, her gloved hands clenching at her sides. This is absurd. You're holding the entire community hostage. I'm doing no such thing, I said calmly. I'm sitting in my house. You are welcome to use the easement for right-of-way access on foot anytime. That easement guarantees passage, not snow removal. That was a separate contract I can no longer fulfill due to the criminal destruction of my equipment. We will sue you into oblivion. Get in line, I said, and gently closed the door in her face. Through the window, I watched her storm back to her luxury SUV parked haphazardly in my driveway. She threw it into reverse, gunning the engine. The tires spun wildly, whining against the snow before finding a pathetic semblance of traction. The vehicle lurched backward, fishtailed, and finally jerked onto the buried access road. She made it about 200 feet before the deep, unplowed snow engulfed the front axle. I watched, a detached observer, as the Range Rover's brake lights flashed and the vehicle rocked uselessly back and forth, digging itself deeper. After 5 minutes, the driver's door flew open, and Brenda emerged, trudging back toward the development on foot, soon swallowed by the whiteout. By noon, the storm's character changed. The wind woke up, howling down from the peaks, sculpting the snow into treacherous, waist-high drifts. The roads up there would be canyons of white. My phone continued its intermittent buzzing, a persistent insect of other people's emergencies. I ignored it. Around 2 p.m., a new sound cut through the wind's moan, the high-pitched whine of a snowmobile. A figure, bundled beyond recognition, navigated the rolling drifts down from the development. The machine bogged down at my property line, and the rider dismounted, abandoning it to struggle the last 100 yards on foot. This time, it was Gerald Winters, the HOA vice president. A semi-retired executive who loved to talk about his Harvard MBA, he now looked like a stranded Arctic explorer, his high-end gear failing him. I opened the door before he could knock. "Come in, Gerald. You look half frozen." He stumbled over the threshold, snow cascading from his shoulders. I pointed to the mat. He stayed on it, melting snow pooling around his boots. "Marcus, thank God," he gasped. "We need your help. This is a catastrophe." "I want to help," I said, meaning it in an abstract way. "But I don't have a truck. It was destroyed. Deliberately." Brenda said, "You're implying the HOA?" "I'm not implying anything. The sheriff is investigating. But let me ask you something, man to man. Did you know about any plans to deal with my truck?" Gerald's eyes darted away. He shifted his weight. There was discussion. At an executive session, Brenda was heated. She said you're making the neighborhood look trashy, hurting values. "What," I asked slowly, "was discussed in that session?" "I can't share that. Executive sessions are confidential, even when the topic might be a felony." "Gerald?" His face paled. "It never should have gone that far. Some talk about towing, but that was illegal with your easement." Brenda kept pushing. I thought she was just blowing off steam. Who was in the room? The full board. Brenda, myself, Cynthia Martinez, Ron Blackwell, Karen Hutchins. "And you all just let her talk about taking aggressive action against my property?" "We didn't authorize anything." She was ranting. "We mostly ignored her." "Except someone didn't ignore her," I said, my voice low. "Someone destroyed $40,000 of my livelihood." He rubbed his face, his gloves leaving wet streaks. "I understand you're angry. You have every right. But punishing 45 families for what one person might have done, it's not right. I'm not punishing anyone. I literally cannot help. But here's a solution. I could rent equipment. A capable truck and plow would run about $1,500 a day, plus fuel, plus my labor. Call it $2,000 a day. This storm will take 2, maybe 3 days to fully clear. That's $6,000. Up front." His jaw went slack. "That's extortionate. It's the market rate for emergency rental during a blizzard." Actually, it's below market. I'm not even charging for the emotional distress. Should I add that line item? I let the question hang. The HOA budget can't absorb that, he finally whispered. Then I suggest a special assessment, or your reserve fund, or divine intervention. But I am not working for free, and I am not extending credit to an organization that just cost me 40 grand. We don't know the HOA was responsible. Then you should hope the sheriff's investigation clears that up quickly. He left without another word. I watched from the window as he spent 20 exhausting minutes digging out his snowmobile, his movements stiff with cold and defeat. The machine's whine faded into the storm's roar, and I was alone again with the certainty that the snow, at least, was impartial. It fell on everyone, trapping the guilty and the innocent alike in a cold, white silence. The storm finally blew itself out in the early hours of November 18th, leaving behind a world of shocking, pristine silence. 26 inches of snow, sculpted by the wind into sweeping, impassable dunes, buried the Pinewood Ridge development. From my window, the landscape was a monochrome masterpiece of white under a sky clearing to a brittle, high-altitude blue. My phone had gone dark, and still some time after midnight, its battery of pleas finally exhausted. I brewed coffee and watched the sunrise paint the mountain peaks in fiery orange, a serene observer to the chaos I knew was unfolding just beyond my tree line. At 8:30, the crunch of tires on my heated driveway broke the quiet. A Summit County Sheriff's SUV pulled in, followed by an unmarked sedan. Deputy Chan emerged, his expression graver than before, accompanied by a woman in a crisp jacket with a detective's badge on her belt. They stamped snow from their boots at the door, and I ushered them into the warmth of the kitchen. "Marcus, this is Detective Sarah Morrison from Investigations," Chun said, dispensing with pleasantries. "We have an update." Detective Morrison fixed me with a direct, no-nonsense gaze. "We executed a search warrant at Brenda Whitmore's residence this morning. We found several items of interest." She listed them like evidence in a catalog. "A sledgehammer with paint transfer matching the damage to your truck. Receipts for spray paint matching graffiti found on the vehicle. A set of bolt cutters consistent with tool marks on your perimeter fence." She wasn't particularly careful. A long, slow breath escaped me, a tension I'd been carrying for days beginning to uncoil. "So, it was her." And one other," Morrison confirmed. "A neighbor's security camera captured 2 individuals approaching your property around 2 a.m. on the 15th. The enhancement is clear. Brenda Whitmore and Karen Hutchins. We placed both under arrest this morning. They're being charged with felony criminal mischief, criminal trespass, and conspiracy." "Karen Hutchins," I repeated, the name settling heavily. "She's on the board." "We're aware this complicates matters," Chin interjected, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who'd seen how these things poison small communities. "A lot of folks up there are already angry about being snowed in. Having their HOA president and a board member arrested for this, it's going to be a mess." "Have they confessed?" Hutchins broke almost immediately. Morrison said, a hint of professional satisfaction in her tone. Said it was all Brenda's idea. Claimed she went along because Brenda convinced her you were destroying property values, making the community look cheap. Their plan, apparently, was to file an insurance claim to get you a new truck after you agreed to move it. The logic is difficult to follow. And Brenda? Not a word. Lawyered up instantly. But Hutchins's statement, combined with the physical evidence and the security footage, gives us a very solid case. After they left, the hollow feeling returned, sharper now. Vindication was supposed to taste sweeter. Instead, I felt a profound weariness. All this destruction, this stress, over a truck parked on its own legal parcel. The sheer, staggering pettiness of it was its own kind of tragedy. Around noon, my phone rang again. An unknown number with a Denver area code. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Lawson? This is Edward Martinez. I am an attorney representing the Pinewood Ridge Homeowners Association." He paused, as if acknowledging the absurdity of the phrase given the circumstances. "What remains of the board, that is? I understand you've been approached regarding emergency snow removal." That's correct. I'd like to discuss terms, he said, his voice smooth and professional. The board is prepared to issue a formal apology for the actions of Ms. Whitmore and Ms. Hutchins, which were taken without board authorization or knowledge. Furthermore, they're prepared to provide compensation for the destruction of your vehicle and related damages. In exchange, we would like to negotiate a new service agreement with mutually favorable terms. I'm listening. The board will pay fair market value for your destroyed vehicle. We estimate that, with modifications, at $42,000. They will also cover all rental equipment costs for the remainder of the season at your actual cost, plus a 15% service fee. For the immediate crisis, they authorize an immediate payment of $6,000 for emergency snow removal over the next 72 hours, with equipment rental fully covered separately. And in return, I asked, though I already knew, your agreement not to pursue civil litigation against the HOA as a corporate entity. Ms. Whitmore and Ms. Hutchins will face the criminal justice system, and you would be free to pursue civil claims against them personally. But the HOA itself, and by extension the community's financial reserves, would be held harmless. The remaining board members wish to prevent the community from being financially devastated by the actions of two individuals. I turned the offer over in my mind. $42,000 was fair. It would cover a new, better truck. The rental coverage and emergency fee put me ahead. Suing the HOA would mean dragging my neighbors, most of whom were just as trapped and blameless as I was victimized, through a long, expensive process. It wasn't about mercy. It was about pragmatism. I wanted in writing, I said, full payment for the vehicle within 30 days. Guaranteed rental coverage through March 31st, paid weekly in advance. The $6,000 for emergency work paid before I turn a key. And I need a formal, signed letter from the board acknowledging that my easement permits commercial vehicle parking and that I have been operating within my rights at all times. I can have a draft agreement to you by end of business today, Martinez replied, no hesitation in his voice. Then we have a deal. How soon do you need me to start? As soon as humanly possible. After hanging up, I got to work. Finding a rental in the aftermath of a major storm was a lesson in persistence. Most yards in the Vail Valley were empty, their fleets already scattered across the county. I finally struck gold with a small equipment outfit in Silverthorne, 30 miles down the pass. They had a 3/4-ton pickup with a decent plow attachment coming back off another job. They wanted $800 a day. I told them to hold it. I'd be there at dawn. The agreement from Attorney Martinez arrived via email at 4:30. I read it with the focused attention of someone who'd learned the hard way to trust nothing. I made a few clarifying marks on the liability clauses and sent it back. By 7 that evening, after 2 more rounds of minor revisions, I signed electronically. Within the hour, a wire transfer for $6,000 landed in my business account from Cynthia Martinez, the HOA treasurer, and, I now knew, the attorney's wife. I was on the road before first light. The highways were clear, the Colorado Department of Transportation crews having worked miracles. By 8 a.m., I was maneuvering the unfamiliar rental truck up the buried access road to Pinewood Ridge. The scale of the task was daunting. The snow was dense and wet, perfect for building those 4-foot drifts that filled the spaces between houses. I started at the top of the development and worked my way down, the plow blade gnawing into the white mass. The work was brutal, a 12-hour-a-day grind of engine roar and constant, careful maneuvering. But as I cleared each street, a change occurred. Residents emerged, not with anger, but with gratitude. They brought thermoses of coffee, sandwiches wrapped in foil, and boxes of homemade cookies. Apologies were offered, not for the crime, but for the hassle and the hostility. A few tried to press cash into my hand, which I refused. Their embarrassment was palpable, a community shame that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the people they'd entrusted with power. A handful of faces remained stony, viewing me through their windows with clear suspicion, believing I'd somehow orchestrated this entire calamity. They were a minority, and I had no energy for their narrative. The work was the only thing that mattered. It took 3 full days. On November 21st, I made the final pass, the rental truck's engine ticking as it cooled in the now-clear cul-de-sac at the development's entrance. The roads were open. Life could resume. I returned the truck to Silver Thurn, the exhaustion in my bones a satisfying ache. The immediate crisis was over. Now, the waiting began for the insurance, for the HOA's payment, for the wheels of justice to turn. But for the first time in weeks, the path forward was clear, plowed free of the emotional drifts that had threatened to bury me alongside my truck. The insurance payout arrived with bureaucratic efficiency. A check for $38,000 landing in my mailbox just a week after I'd submitted the police report. The HOA's payment, the promised $42,000, followed exactly on schedule 30 days after the incident. The combined sum felt less like a windfall and more like a restoration, a numerical correction to a violent wrong. I placed an order for a new truck that same day, a heavy-duty Ford F-450 with a state-of-the-art hydraulic plow system and a surround view camera setup. It'll be ready in January. Until then, the rental, covered by the HOA's weekly payments, became my reliable, if impersonal, workhorse. The legal proceedings against Brenda and Karen moved forward with the grim inevitability of a rock slide. Karen Hutchins, true to the detective's word, took a plea deal in mid-December. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay $15,000 in restitution. A for sale sign appeared in front of her picture windowed home a week later. Brenda Whitmore, however, chose to fight. Her trial began in early March. I didn't attend, but Deputy Chun kept me informed. The evidence was overwhelming. The tools, the footage, Karen's testimony. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. Brenda was convicted on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation, $25,000 in restitution, and she was ordered to pay my attorney's fees for the separate civil suit I'd quietly filed against her personally. Justice, in its cold, transactional form, had been delivered. The community itself underwent a quiet revolution. Gerald Winters, as acting HOA president, immediately rescinded all violation notices against me. His first official act with the reconstituted board was to amend the covenants, explicitly recognizing pre-existing easements and their associated rights. The measure passed with overwhelming support from the homeowners, a clear repudiation of the former regime's overreach. The new board, led by a retired teacher named Susan Kowalski, focused on transparency and common sense, not control. My new truck arrived on a crystalline January day, its black paint gleaming against the snow. It was more than a vehicle, it was a statement. I parked it proudly in the center of my driveway, in the very spot its predecessor had been murdered. The winter that followed was one of the fiercest in recent memory, storm after storm piling up over 200 inches of snow. I plowed the roads of Pinewood Ridge dozens of times, paid promptly, and treated with a respect that bordered on deference. The work was its own reward, the rhythm of the plow against pavement a soothing counterpoint to the previous season's chaos. In April, with the last patches of grimy snow melting away, Gerald Winters stopped by with a bottle of expensive scotch and a look of profound relief. "I wanted to thank you," he said, handing me the bottle, "for not burning the whole thing down. You would have been justified." "What would that have solved?" I asked, accepting the gift. "Most people up there were just as stuck as I was wronged." "Still," he said, "you showed grace." The new board were implementing term limits, requiring membership votes for any enforcement action. Try to build something better. He left with a nod, and I understood his visit was as much an absolution for his own inaction as it was a thank you. Summer brought a deep, healing quiet. I expanded my business, picking up contracts in 2 neighboring communities whose boards had heard the cautionary tale of Pinewood Ridge. In September, an invitation arrived to speak at the Colorado HOA Coalition's annual conference. Reluctantly, I agreed. Standing before a room of 200 board members and managers in a Denver hotel, I simply told the story, the facts, the timeline, the consequences. I didn't preach. I just showed them the cost of petty tyranny and the value of knowing where the law actually stood. Afterward, business cards were pressed into my hand, and a quiet consulting side hustle was born from the wreckage. On the anniversary of the destruction, I received a letter from Karen Hutchins, postmarked from Oregon. She wrote of therapy, of restitution payments, of volunteering at a mediation center. She wrote of guilt and the hope for redemption. I filed the letter away, believing in the possibility of change, but knowing some scars, for both the perpetrator and the victim, never fully fade. Time moved on. Brenda served her sentence and moved to Arizona. A young family bought her house. Life in Pinewood Ridge normalized, its property values even ticking upward once the toxicity was purged. 2 years later, almost to the day, I found myself at a Summit County Sheriff's Department Community Awards ceremony, of all places. Detective Morrison called my name, praising my civic responsibility and integrity during the investigation. As I accepted the plaque to polite applause, I looked out at the crowd and saw neighbors, deputies, even Attorney Martinez. In that moment, the last of the coiled anger I'd carried released its grip. This wasn't about victory. It was about closure. The system, flawed as it was, had worked. The community had learned. I had rebuilt something stronger. That night, back home, I sat on my porch as the first snow of a new season began to fall, a gentle echo of the storm that had started it all. My truck sat ready in the driveway, a symbol of resilience. The mountains were a dark silhouette against a starry sky. The silence was complete, but it was no longer the silence of siege. It was the silence of peace, earned and hard-won. I had never set out to teach a lesson or become a local legend. I had simply stood on the ground that was mine, protected by the words on a deed and the principle they represented. When pushed, I hadn't pushed back wildly. I had stood firm and let the weight of law and consequence fall where it belonged. In the end, that was enough. The snow would keep falling, the roads would need plowing, and I would be there to do the work. Not as a victim, not as a victor, but simply as a man living his life, on his own land, on his own terms. And that, I realized as I went inside to the warmth, was the only revenge that ever really mattered.